Hello, everyone. I am so excited that we're bringing Come As You Are back to 2023. And I am delighted today to be with somebody that is near and dear to IE. Although, when we scheduled this, we didn't know how near and dear she would be. So I'm so delighted to introduce Eliza Cussen. She is the Chief Advancement Officer of Ensure Equality, but she's not here for that reason today. She's here because she's also CEO and founder of a pretty important organization, we think, because it's something that's rather stigmatized in today's society. So I'd really love to introduce Eliza. And Eliza, tell us what you're doing and why it's important.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Divorcist, which is the gift registry for the newly single. So we are a startup social enterprise that basically designs technology and community for people going through relationship transition. So divorce, separation, breakups, friend breakups, co-parenting. We just found that there was a gap, as Gen X, as millennials kind of age into the divorce phase of life. There was nothing comparable to a baby list or a Zola or any kind of community like that to just catch you. There's nothing that you can just download on your phone and be like, oh, this is my divorce community. This is how I build my circle of support around this transition. We had this idea, my co-founder Elizabeth and I, soon after I had my baby and did my baby registry thing. A bunch of our friends were all going through really horrific breakups around the same time. And we're like, this should exist. And we kept Googling, we kept looking for it, we kept expecting to read about it. And then it was like, well, let's see how far we get. And pretty far, it turns out. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
I loved our first conversation and you telling us about it because there's so many stories that are wrapped up into this. I mean, it really comes from, like you said, you were in that baby phase process, doing your baby registry, and all of these folks around you were experiencing it. I experienced my first divorce well, only one, when I was 23, and I can relate to
Baby.
the baby. I was a baby, and I didn't have anything. We had everything together, and I didn't want to bring all of these pieces of my life with me into the next phase of my life. So I started out in an 800 square foot apartment with my cat and a bed.
Mhm.
And to your point, we're celebrating these life events, these happy life events, but there's still need in solemn life events. So that's my story, but I'm curious, like, what's yours? What's Elizabeth's? Like, what's the real advent here?
Well, when we launched, we would joke like in our pitch deck and on our about page, um, between us, we've had 3 weddings and 2 divorces, both of them Elizabeth. So when we launched, as we were building this, I was quote unquote happily married. Um, since then, things have changed. And I wrote about this on divorcist.com. We had a really fantastic blog with expert advice and personal stories and, everything you would hope to expect, the most supportive place on the internet. Um, so my story is I moved to the United States to be with my partner. Um, we met overseas. He was fresh out of the army. He'd been home from Iraq for just a few months when we met in London. We dated long distance and eventually got engaged in San Francisco. I got back to Sydney, then moved over and moved eventually to his hometown in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So that's the context, I packed up my life. I folded up my career and moved to a place I'd only been to once. And 8 years later, we had a 2.5-year-old, and one Tuesday night, I had just gotten our toddler down to bed, which is a process, as any parent will know. And I was exhausted. I'd had like a 12-hour work day. All I wanted to do was watch Stranger Things and go to bed early. And instead, my husband was sitting on the couch, which is unusual because normally he would retreat to his basement cave at that time of night once parenting was done. So it was very unusual that he was above ground. And I was like, huh, what's going on here? And it turns out he was leaving me.
Mm.
And my first thought was like, but I wanted to watch Stranger Things. He's like, I'm like, it's a Tuesday. No one gets divorced on a Tuesday. This is a Friday conversation. Like, I have things to do. I'm a busy lady. At the time, I was also, this was 2022. I was working at the Human Rights Campaign on the midterm elections. I was trying to organize LGBTQ people to elect pro-equality candidates around the country. I was like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
Was my main thought. And like the audacity. And his reasoning was, I feel empty. I don't feel happy. And that's your fault. So not that I think it was necessarily the wrong decision to break up. Because obviously when someone tells you that, off you go, son, But, some people will do a lot instead of going to therapy, up to and including their leaving their spouse. So, we're now, working on developing our friendship and our co-parenting relationship. But what really struck me in my particular situation, and I think this resonates with a lot of women, is, my husband being in a poor mental health state was really inside himself and not looking outward. Like I had to tell him, like, I don't have a job on December 1st. He knew, like, I was on a contract. Like, no, like campaigns will scale up and scale down depending where we are in the election season. I was like, I'm meant to be, starting this business. Like, have you thought of any of this? And all of this was news to him. I remember this look of like surprise. And it was this process of like, no, I'm a person. Because he was able to compartmentalize. And I really had to assert, like, no, I have needs. I continue to exist, even if we're not living together. And I don't fault him for that necessarily. He's a combat veteran. And I've given him maybe a bit too much grace in that.
But still, like, this was a traumatic event for you too. And I
right.
think that's really the crux of the conversation, right? Like this is a life event. I think it's listed in one of the top 5, at least the top 10 stressful life events to go through. And you have a child as well, which only adds to the level of stress, the level of like thought that has to go into the co-parenting, that sort of thing. And I really, go ahead.
And I think that what people don't realize is for trailing spouses and immigrant spouses, there's an extra level of vulnerability. And it now means I can't go home for the next 15 years.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Right?
That's
because
huge.
Co-parenting means you're geographically bound to each other. So in Wisconsin, the default is you live within 100 miles of each other, unless you come to an agreement. And there are, a million different ways to co-parent, but that's the standard. So, I'm was looking at jobs recently, and people are like, oh, there's this in Madison, there's this in Milwaukee, there's this in Minneapolis. I was like, no, no, honey, Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I love Green Bay. I love the community here. I have fantastic friends, but I didn't choose it. It's not my town. And so that's something I've really struggled with too, is moving home to Australia or over with my family in the UK. They're no longer available to me. So that is, I think, really crushing, and it changes your relationship with your home when that happens to you, when that agency is taken away. So yeah, Green Bay, Wisconsin for the next 15 and a half years. Come
Eliza, I
visit.
am, yeah, maybe not in March. Maybe,
Yeah,
July would be a better time.
it's so nice in
That
early August.
There we go. So now we know. Thank you so much for sharing. I know that it's really difficult. One of our core values here is like being squishy, and you like demonstrate that fully. I want to point out that's a huge piece that I didn't even think about, but something I think other folks don't think about is a safety issue. Someone very near and dear to me is going through a divorce, which is why when we met, the conversation we had struck me so hard, because this person is also going through a domestic violence piece with this divorce as well. Ooh. And so when you think about the fear that's associated with that and being found out, it's huge. And I'll share one more piece. You and I spoke about this before we hopped on. I haven't shared this publicly ever. People know I grew up in an abusive household, but there was a point in which we were in a safe house because it was that bad. My father was able to find the address of the safe house and not only imperiled my mother and my siblings and I, but also the other women and children that were in the safe house. And so the thing that struck me the most about what you're doing is a level of protection that you're building, and I think it's imperative that we talk about it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's not uncommon. So to back up in time a little bit, in 2016, I was working in pro-choice advocacy and women's rights, and I was part of a fellowship program that worked in Wisconsin to take legislation that was in draft but was kind of stalled. It was on its way through the schoolhouse rock, on its way to becoming a law, but getting stuck along the way.
Nice job.
Yeah, not my culture, but I've told everything I know about America comes from The Simpsons or Seinfeld. So yeah. So this bill, the Safe at Home Act, was stuck. And what this does is create an address confidentiality program for the state of Wisconsin. I believe Illinois has one. We based ours off of Minnesota. What this does is prevent that from happening to other families. It provides a dummy address for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking who have relocated. And it protects your physical address, your real address, from being publicly available, including in the police database, because we know that abusers are disproportionately represented in law enforcement. So how this works is you get into this program. The Wisconsin Department of Justice has an office that essentially forwards your mail. If you sign up for, say, Walgreens Rewards program, for example, you give them your fake address, not your real address, and then you get mail from Walgreens if that's what you're into. Then just the use case here, say your abuser calls Walgreens and says like, oh, hey, I had ordered this prescription to come to our house. I just need to check that it's on its way because, my kid needs his medicine. And the Walgreens clerk says, "Oh, absolutely, I'll help with that. Just tell me your address. Oh, like, let me check that the address I have for you is right on file." Right? No
Yeah.
fault of the Walgreens clerk. She doesn't know. But that's how crafty abusers can be. I remember my colleague on the team said abusers are savvy, savvy, savvy. They might be dumb, but they're savvy. And they will go to any lengths to get to you. That's why, often shelters have high fences and you can't see cars from the street. Things like that. They're designed with purpose, because people will drive by and try to find you. So this address confidentiality program was signed into law in 2016 by Governor Walker, because of our advocacy. And so I had done this process of writing a bill and getting it through passed to a law. So 5 years later, we're designing this software for a gift registry. And it's my job to convert this legislation into code.
Mm.
How can we provide that same level of security and privacy for our most vulnerable users? So we really designed around a misuse scenario of someone using our technology to find the location of their ex-partner. So what happens on Divorcist registry is you find your friend's registry, you see that they need, our most popular item is bed sheets. So they have registered for some beautiful, like 400 thread count sheets. You go to purchase it. In the checkout process, you never see their shipping address. Because
Yeah.
we were designing around protecting lives, and our motto is to design for the most vulnerable user. So that's really why Divorcist registry is so significant, and why it has this potential. To talk about the nuts and bolts of what it takes to design a product, to build software, launch a business. We met with many gift registry providers, and a lot of the time we're like laughed out of the building, because why should I get people a present if they're getting divorced?
Mm. May I jump in here? Because yes, everything you're saying is spot on, because I've lived it, you're living it. So many people right now are living it. I know during the pandemic, all of that was super heightened, and not that it's over, but there was a kind of an immediate need over 2020, 2021.
Mhm.
And for those of you that are watching this going, how does this relate to insurance at all? Think about your coworkers, who's next to you, and showing up every day. You mentioned this happened to you on a Tuesday. You're a mom, you have lives, you have businesses to run, you still have to show up. A lot of people walk around with this pain and this cultural shame. We've applied a lot of cultural shame to this, where it doesn't need to be a lot of stigma. And so I love that you are, in a way, I wouldn't call it a celebration, but I would say it is creating community. And I know that you use that word as well. I'm sure that was an intention of yours, but are you seeing that happen as a natural byproduct of Divorcist registry?
Yes. So we have this incredible blog program. Our social media community is so engaged and so vibrant. The next evolution of that is actually building out a forum for people.
Mm.
What we're learning more and more is that people who have gone through it, maybe 5, 10, 20 years down the line, really want to be able to give back. They want to be able to buy the bed sheets for people. They want to be able to, just be like, hey, you've got this. Or like, here's how I got my kid to go back to sleeping in their own bed after their dad moved out. Like, this real stuff. And so there's this wealth of experience and love out there. What we're doing is layering technology on top to help that organically happen. So yeah, we're just responding to what our community needs, and trying to do it in the most secure, private, and safe way possible.
I love it. There's two questions I want to ask you. And the first is, what would you say to somebody that's going through it right now? I mean, it's a very real situation for you. And so, not to put you on the spot with the rawness and the realness, but surely someone that has made it this far into this video might need a little bit of love. Like, what would you say to them right now?
I mean, it really does get better. For me, it was shock, but there was also relief. So on the Wednesday, when my husband actually came and like packed a bag and left, I actually took myself over to my co-founder's house, Elizabeth. She's further down the line from me. She's been divorced for 6 years, and she has what we call girl house because she built her house and bedazzled it. It's full of rose gold and crystal chandeliers and velvet, and it's girl house. She's got an excellent bathtub. And so I took my daughter there to girl house, and we ordered takeout. I let myself in. Always have your co-founders house keys, just inevitably.
Rule of life right there.
Rule of life. And we had a Taylor Swift dance party, and I was like, I remember like twirling around with my toddler and just having this sense of freedom. And it was freedom from my situation, but also freedom from decision making, because the decision had been made for me and I no longer had to do that calculus. It was awful because I was not financially prepared to be a single parent by any means. But that emotional preparedness, I feel like I just got to skip some steps. And that was so liberating. And I've held on to that feeling. And that's grown and grown. So I think if you can find that piece of relief, just encourage that to bloom while you're dealing with everything else. And, you know, go to Divorcist, start a cash fund. Because if you don't believe that money can't buy happiness, you have too much of it. Right?
That's another rule of life right there, I think.
Right. Yes.
That was going to be my second question. So there's a website, clearly there's a way to engage. So let's hear, if you're going through this process, how to engage with you. And if you want to support someone going through this process, how to engage with you too. Because I think, and I don't think I'm alone in this, I think what you're doing has been needed for a very long time, and I'm really excited to see it grow. So how can people from any side of this help somebody in need?
Yeah, well, you can go onto divorcist.com, and from there you can go and find people's registries and buy them some sheets. Contribute to a cash fund. All the money goes directly to them. We don't take a cut of that. And yeah, just give back any way you can. If you can, you know, contribute to the blog, contribute to our social media community, please do, because it is just so important that particularly women, but all people who've been there, and have been kind of on the losing side of a divorce, as that happens, really bind together.
How can people connect to you? Because obviously now you fill a lot of important roles, like with us. You are the Chief Advancement Officer, but you are also doing this amazing thing. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what is the best way to do it? Is it LinkedIn? Is it an email address? Like, how can people get a hold of you?
ElizaCussen.com is nice and
Awesome.
pretty. There's a contact form. Also, LinkedIn is great. I'm the only person with my name out there. I'm very easy to find. Thankfully, I had the good sense not to change that when I got married. So there's no rebranding needing to happen here.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and Divorcist.com is, yeah, where you find us and where you can help.
Thanks so much for being here, for coming exactly as you are, for being squishy with me. Any final thoughts before we say thank you and goodbye to everybody?
I think what I would really encourage people to do who are going through it, who are in the weeds, is to ask for help,
Mm.
because the people around you are looking for ways to help you. And it's like any traumatic event, a death in the family or a diagnosis, people are around you being like, I wish I could do something. Help them help you. Create a registry, send them the link and be like, everyone who's reached out and to be like, how are you doing? You say, not great. Here's how you can help me. And then you have a link to your Divorcist registry. People want to help you. I promise you that. You are not a burden. You are not too much. You are exactly what you need to be. So Divorcist is here to help you get the help you need.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you, Eliza, and thank you everyone for watching. Have a great day.
Thank you.